Welcome everybody. Um, yes, let us start over. So welcome everybody to our At Home with Theosophy. We are exploring this very interesting book, Karma by Annie Besant. And we will continue with our exploration of the subject today with how the process of karma. We have seen in the previous class how karma is produced as a cause, and today we are going to see how it manifests as effects. So we will continue with the same system that we have been using. I'll read some excerpts from the book and explain, and but I recommend you to read the whole book. There are parts that I don't make any comments on because they are easy to understand, or they are accessory information, but the whole thing is interesting, so I encourage you to read the whole book. So the subject for tonight is the working out of karma. And Annie Besant begins saying, when the soul has lived out its devachanic life, remember that devachan was this post-mortem state in which the soul is in a process of assimilating the lessons, the spiritual lessons from the previous life. So once this devachanic life is over and the soul has assimilated all that it can of the material gathered during its last period on earth, it begins to be drawn again towards earth by the links of desire that bind it to material existence. This is interesting to see that the reason why we incarnate again is because of desire, the links of desire that bind us to a material existence. The idea is that it's similar to what happens in meditation. For example, we may go into meditation and we may even have a very good meditation when we are in a very peaceful state, and that could last forever. There is no disturbance there. But in some way or for some reason, that state of meditation ends and we feel the thirst to experience life again. Even if the day will bring conflict or will bring difficulties and we were in meditation in a very peaceful state, there is this thirst that eventually takes us out of this state of harmony into the experience of getting information through our senses. Ed is asking, why doesn't it take an instant? I suppose an instant from one death to the next one. Is that what you are asking, Ed? If that is the case, the idea is that this is more or less what happens. If we use a metaphor, it's more or less what happens after we eat. We are hungry, we eat, and that eating satiates our sense of hunger, and then there is a process of digestion. If we ate enough, at the moment we may feel that we don't want to eat again. If somebody asks us what we want for dinner right after having lunch, probably our feeling is, I don't want to eat again. I'm not going to have dinner. But then what happens is that after all that food was digested, the hunger comes again. So something similar happens with the soul. When the life period is over, or actually when the physical life is over, the soul is satiated of embodied experience. So we need some time to assimilate all that. Once that is assimilated, then the hunger for experience, for embodied experience through a separate center of consciousness arises, and the soul incarnates again. So Annie Besant explains briefly the way down, so to say, into incarnation, and it says, the last stage of its life period, remember that Annie Besant defines life period from one birth to the next rebirth, including all the post-mortem experience. So the last stage of its life period now lies before it, before the soul. The stage during which it reclothes itself for another experience of earthly life, the stage that is closed by the gateway of birth. The soul steps over the threshold of Devachan, bringing with it the result, small or great, of its Devachanic work. Whatever assimilation was possible there changed the soul. If there was a life where causes were produced that can be assimilated in Devachan, it will be markedly different. The difference will be marked. If it was a very materialistic life, the difference between the experience in one incarnation to the next at the level of the soul will be small. And that's what Annie Besant explains. If it be but a young soul, it will have gained but little. Progress in early stages of soul evolution is slow, to an extent scarcely realized by most students. As faculties develop, growth quickens at an ever-increasing rate, and the soul that enters Devachan with a large store of material comes out of it with a large increase of faculty, worked out under the general laws before stated. Remember that we said the aspirations become faculties, etc. So now, remember, Devachan is on the mental plane, the plane that comes immediately after the mental plane on the way to incarnate in the physical plane is the astral plane. So passing on to the astral plane, the soul clothes itself anew in a body of desire, the first result of the workings out of its past karma. So the first thing that the soul in the mental body builds in the process of incarnation is the emotional body will be the result of the emotional activity in the previous life. The mental images formed during the past are now thrown outwards by the soul and immediately attract to themselves from the matter of the astral plane the kamic elements congenial to their natures. Kamic, remember, kama is the Sanskrit word for passion or desire. So when, remember that we said the mental images are like seeds that when the soul goes to Devachan, the seeds that are not able to be expressed in Devachan remain latent. But when the soul comes back to the astral plane, these seeds are reactivated and they attract the astral matter that will give the possibility of expression. So Annie Besant says that these kamic elements, this astral matter that is attracted, will become the appetites, passions of his desired body for his new incarnation. The astral plane, the kamic principle, is related to the lower emotions. Higher emotions like love, compassion, inspiration, aspiration, all these, the appreciation of beauty, all these are the reflection on the emotional body from the higher nature. But the lower emotions, the ones that are selfish, self-serving, the ones that are related to biological instincts, they all are come from the astral plane itself, from the kamic elements. So these become the more materialistic tendencies in a person. So when this work of building the astral body is accomplished, And Annie Besant says, a work sometimes very brief, or sometimes one that causes a long delay. The ego, the soul, stands in the karmic vesture he has prepared for himself, ready to receive from the hands of the agents of the great lords of karma the etheric double built for him, according to the elements he has himself provided. So once the emotional body, the body of desires is generated, the next stage is to build what in Theosophy is called the etheric double. The etheric double is an invisible mold for the physical body. Anything that the physical body is built around the etheric body. So the etheric body is the pattern, the physical body is matter added to the pattern, so to say. So it says that this etheric double is received from the what she calls the agents of the great lords of karma. In Hinduism, there are two hierarchy or two kinds of beings that are involved in this karmic process. What is called the Lords of Karma, which in Sanskrit is Lipika, 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 which means the recorders. And then the four, sometimes they are called the four Maharajas, which are the agents of these lords of karma that work at the level of the physical plane, including the etheric double. Again, when we talk about beings, try not to think merely of human-like beings. Blavatsky and Theosophy in general says that every law in nature is mediated by some kind of consciousness or some kind of awareness of very different kinds. Even an illness that can be seen as a mechanical process because you can predict how the illness will develop is mediated by living beings, or the making of honey is mediated by living beings, the bees. So everything in nature, according to the Theosophical view, is mediated in some way by living beings. And the names that symbolically they are given are these, the lords of karma or the Maharajas. So whatever the case, the etheric double is built with the intelligence of these beings, or by means of this kind of intelligence, with the elements that the soul has created. So the etheric double built will shape his physical body, the house which he must inhabit during his coming physical life. What he thought on, the person, that he has become. The man is in very truth self-created, responsible in the fullest sense of the word for all that he is. Now again, we are talking about the lower planes. We could say that the personality creates itself, but the personality itself is kind of mechanical and just responds to the stimulus in nature. So ultimately speaking, the higher ego is responsible, but then this higher ego is an individualization of the universal one being. So as we saw, as we discussed a little in this class, everything that happens is actually the result of all the forces in the universe that are acting to produce a local result. In this case, this local result is what we call a human being. But if you follow the ray of consciousness, it is a ray of consciousness that is expressing through the individuality, the higher ego, that seems to be a concentration of the forces of the universe that produce the human being. Ed has something to say. Go ahead, Ed.
I was just thinking that if you're born in China, you get a Chinese body. And so where does the form of the exact physical body, when is that uh, uh, created? In other words, when do you know you're going to be born in China and you're going to get the physical and mental characteristics associated with that?
Besant will talk about that a little later, but it is at this stage that the country, the family, the culture around the race is chosen. When the emotional body is formed, the emotional body is just a result of the previous activities, neither Chinese nor American, for example. Now, when the etheric double begins to be shaped, it is shaped according to whatever the place and the time was chosen for that souls to be born. And that building of the etheric double, and therefore of a particular physical body and a particular culture, will limit the expression of the emotional body and also of the mental body. So in this view, it is basically the physical body that produces the limitation as to what aspect of the psyche is going to be expressed. So the physical body would be like a window through which the psyche has to look at the world. At the same time, the psyche itself, the mind and the emotions, is just a fragment of the soul. So it is a fragment of the fragment. But we are going to see that in a little bit. So Annie Besant says, but this man is to have a physical and etheric body that will largely condition the exercise of his faculties. He is to live amidst some outward circumstances. He is to tread a path marked out by the causes he has set going. He has to meet events joyful and sorrowful, resulting from the forces he has generated. How is the field to be provided? How are the conditioning instruments and the reacting circumstances to be found and adapted? Because so far we have seen that our aspirations modify ourselves at the level of the soul. But she's asking how is the right circumstances and the right kind of body going to be provided, which is more or less what Ed was asking. And she says, we approach a region whereof little may be fitly said, in that it is the region of mighty spiritual intelligences, whose nature is far beyond the scope of our very limited faculties, whose existence may indeed be known, and whose workings may be traced, but we can have no conception of the scope and workings of their consciousness. These great ones are spoken of as the Lipika and the four Maharajas. This is what I was explaining. And Annie Besant says, we can trace their activity, and by we, I mean she's mainly talking about people like her or Levitt or Blavatsky or some others in the world that are able to research into the inner planes. And they say, we can trace their activity, but we cannot really understand their nature. And she gives a quote from the Secret Doctrine. She says, how little we can know of the Lipika, the Lords of Karma, may be seen from the following. So this is from Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine. She says, the Lipika belong to the most occult portion of cosmogenesis. Whether the adepts, these enlightened beings, even the highest, know this angelic order in the completeness of its triple degrees, or only the lower one connected with the records of our world, is something which the writer is unprepared to say. and she would rather incline to the latter supposition. So Blavatsky, in the Theosophical view, there are always three levels of these hierarchies. There is one that is universal, another one a reflection of that acts in the solar system or in the particular system where a planet is developing, and then another level that is related to one particular planet. So Blavatsky says that in her speculation, the adepts, even the highest, probably only know the lipika that has to do with the planet, because these are very high angelic orders. And she says, of its highest grade, one thing only is taught. The lipika are connected with karma, being its direct recorders. So with that in mind, and this is important to keep in mind because it's very easy to personalize everything, to anthropomorphize everything. There is always this tension. Either you think of the universal laws as being little human beings or big human beings pulling the strings behind, or the other tendency on the other end of the scale is to think that laws are just mechanical, unconscious natures, whatever they are. So Blavatsky is always playing with this tension, trying to say there is an intelligence behind, but it's not an intelligence as we understand it. But anyway, going on with our subject, Annie Besant says the ego, the soul, is guided by the Maharajas to the country, race, family, and social surroundings, which afford the most suitable field for the working out of the karma allotted to the particular lifetime in question. That which the Hindus call the prarabdha karma, that is, that which is to be worked out in the opening life period. We are going to see briefly these different kinds of karma, but the idea is that these four Maharajas that are involved in the creation of the etheric double, according to the karma that the person has generated, are the forces that guide a particular soul to be born in a particular family and race, and this is also something interesting to keep in mind. You know that sometimes in psychology we tend to think that a person has a particular psychological makeup because as a result of how his family or her family was, or how the circumstances were. What these teachings say is that actually, instead of being the cause, the family, it is the effect, because the soul is brought to a family that will produce the appropriate circumstances to generate this particular psyche. It is true that the family and the circumstances mold the psyche of a person, but the idea is that that person had already the seeds that brought the soul to that particular family, and what the family did is only to water the seed, not to produce the seed. Okay, go ahead, Ed.
So does Annie Besant have some sort of theory why there's, a billion Chinese and a billion Indians and only a few thousand Filipinos and, et cetera, et cetera?
Mm-hmm. I don't know that if there is a particular, a specific explanation for that. I could say that this is in the context of the cycles of evolution of at the level of populations. So there are some races of people that have been evolving for a longer time than other races. So in the process of evolving, there is a cycle of birth of that particular race, and then the expansion, the growth, and then there is a natural process of dying out of the race until it disappears. And of course, souls are born in all the races that are on Earth. Every race has a particular lesson to teach to the soul. The Chinese are one, according to what Annie Besant and Leadbeater described, are one of the oldest races, and so are the Indians. So perhaps the number has to do with, in some way, with that kind of growth, but I'm not ready to say that this is my speculation. I don't know. Probably the law of populations is quite complex, and I don't know if that is the particular cause. But I would look in that direction to try to find an explanation. Alright, so Annie Besant just talked about the prarabdha karma, which is the karma that is going to be worked out in that particular life, implying that there is some other kind of karma. She says, so much of the total karma as can be arranged for in one life period has a suitable etheric double provided for it. No one instrument could be formed, no surroundings could be found suitable for the expression of all the slowly evolved faculties of the ego, nor affording all the circumstances necessary for reaping all the harvest sown in the past. So the idea is that there are far more causes pending than the ones that can be actually satisfied or expressed in one particular life. And many of those causes are just contradictory. The two together couldn't be there in a single life. So in Hinduism, there is this idea of three types of karma, which the Theosophical teachings many times agree on. And there is what is called the Sanchita karma, which is the karma that the causes that have been accumulated in all the past lives. The idea is that, as we said, not all the causes created can be worked out in one particular life. So some causes have to be kept in suspension until the right circumstances can be created. Also, in the process of evolution, at the beginning, when the soul is still quite dormant and it's pretty much a victim of the animalistic tendencies that we inherit from the animal kingdom in the physical evolution, most of the karmic causes produced in a life as a savage are what we could call negative causes. Not that they are abnormal. At that time, it's natural that humanity will be aggressive and will be very selfish, and they will kill each other as a matter of fact. And karma always is tied to the moral responsibility. So the causes, the killing of a savage doesn't have the same results as the killing of a person that is educated. But nevertheless, let's say for the first half of the process of evolution, most of the causes tend to be self-centered. And then suppose, let's say, the second half, when the soul is beginning to awaken, then there is a production of more spiritual causes. So if all the causes generated in one lifetime were to be worked out in the next lifetime, probably the karmic weight would be too much and would just crush the soul. It wouldn't let the soul grow. The idea of karma is not a punishment, but is, if we want to compare it with some human images, karma is more a teacher than a punisher. So if a soul did, or was involved in something that the personality did, that something was cruel, probably that cause is not going to be worked out in the next lifetime, because the soul couldn't learn anyway from it. It will keep doing the same. So many times these causes are suspended until the soul has the ability to learn, and then all these accumulated causes will begin to manifest. This is why you have some people that are very good people, very spiritual people, and yet they have these unfortunate events in their lives. And this is a case of all of us, because we have causes accumulated from who knows when. So we are going to see that a little later, but that is the idea of the Sanchita karma, is the accumulated causes from the past. The Prarabdha karma is the karma that is going to be expressed in this particular lifetime. And the body, as we have seen, the etheric double and the body are an expression of this Prarabdha karma. And then there is one more, the Agami karma, which are the new causes that we are generating in this lifetime, that will become a future karma. Now there is a certain flexibility in this. Some of the karma generated now, if it can be immediately work out, it will happen. Some of the accumulated karma perhaps can be worked out in this life if the conditions are appropriate. But generally speaking, we could say that there are these three kinds of karma. And this has some important effects, as we are going to see by the end. So Annie Besant goes on and says the ego is placed where it may come into relations with some of those with whom it has been related in its past. And again, with some of those, there are many people that we relate to in previous lifetimes, and there is only a limited number of them that we can meet in this particular country and this particular time that we are incarnating. And of course, there are many others that we have never met in previous lifetimes. So some of them, we will be attracted to some of those souls that we have generated in a kind of because of links of love or hate. And Ed says that more on the internet. Yeah, I guess that now we can relate to more people thanks to the internet. But anyway, the idea is that we generate links to people based on love or hate, and we will be attracted to whoever is incarnated at the time, more or less in the vicinity of where we are, or if we happen to move to other city or country, that may be also part of karma. So a country is chosen where the religious, political, and social conditions are suitable. A race with characteristics resembling some of the faculties which are ripe for exercise is selected. A family is found in which physical heredity will afford play to the mental and passional natures of the ego. So a family that has the right genetic structure to produce a particular body and brain and hormonal balance or unbalance and everything, the right family is chosen so that it can reproduce the kind of body which is necessary for this particular kind of experience. And it says, she says, out of the manifold qualities existing in the soul, and out of the manifold physical types existing in the world, such can be selected as are adapted to each other. Yeah, David is saying that one ego is capitalized and the other is not. I don't know if that is a typo from the book that I got. Normally when the ego is with lower e, it's the lower ego, the psyche, the mind and emotions. And maybe she really meant the ego, the psyche. And then this with with capital E that some people pronounce ego because it comes from the Greek word. This is the soul. Remember, I explained in the first class, the word ego means I-ness. So there is a spiritual I-ness or a spiritual ego. There is a personal I-ness, which is the lower ego, the personal ego. There are different expressions of this I-ness. So when you see with capital E, is normally the soul, the higher ego. So see that here it says, out of the manifold qualities existing in the soul. So again, this brings the idea that the personality is only a fragment of the soul. So you can never judge what a person is through the personality. We are going to see that later on too. Just keep that in mind. A particular personality is a particular limitation of the soul to work out a particular set of karmic causes. And because of this, there may be a big difference at the level of the personality between one life and the others, and the next one. If the soul chooses to work out a large amount of limiting causes, that personality will be very limited, without this implying that the soul is, very little evolved. Or the opposite is also possible. So Annie Besant quotes from Iamblichus, as was written by the sage Iamblichus. He was a Neoplatonist, very interesting character and teacher. In his book on the mysteries of Egypt, he says, what appears to us to be an accurate definition of justice does not also appear to be so to the gods. For we, looking to that which is most brief, to this particular lifetime, direct our attention to things present and to this momentary life, and the manner in which it subsists. But the powers that are superior to us know the whole life of the soul and all its former lives. So it's a little quote pointing out to the fact that when we see one particular lifetime, it's like if we were seeing one day in the life of the soul, and unless we can see it in relationship to the previous days, we cannot really understand what's just or fair and what is not. So Annie Besant says, this assurance that perfect justice rules the world rings support for the increasing knowledge of the evolving soul. For as it advances and begins to see on higher planes and to transmit its knowledge to the waking consciousness, we learn with ever-growing certainty, and therefore with ever-increasing joy, that the good law is working with undeviating accuracy, that its agents apply it everywhere with unerring insight, with unfailing strength, and that all is therefore very well with the world and with its struggling souls. So the idea here is, I thought that it was fine. Ed is saying that I had to double, in the book it says Rhines, but I had to double check that if that was an old English word that Annie Besant frequently uses, but it's probably a typo there, I apologize. So the idea is that what I find interesting here is that as the soul increases in knowledge and begins to be able to see on the higher planes, as the soul on the higher planes begins to see the bigger picture, and then as the soul is able to pass this knowledge to the waking consciousness, there is this duality in human beings, which is what we know when we are not limited by the body, and what we know when we are limited by the body. So the soul, which is ourselves, but at the level in which we are not limited by the body, can know that this bigger picture. But then many times we cannot retain that knowledge, and when we are in the body, then we forget it. Part of this, the spiritual practice, especially the practice of a pure life, a pure physical, emotional, and mental life, part of the aim of this is to set the vehicles of consciousness in a kind of vibration that is in tune to the knowledge that the soul has, so that all this knowledge that we have at the level of the soul can be filtered through the brain, and then when we are awake, when we are in our waking state, we can retain this knowledge. Even if it is not absolutely conscious, it comes to a person as an intuition. So this intuition may manifest just as a kind of certainty that there is justice in the world, in the sense that we are okay, we don't question. There is a stage where the person is in a rebellion against life. Why is life like this? Why did this happen to me or to that person? And some people get angry at God or what they imagine God is. So there is a stage where there is all this confusion. And then there is a stage where there can be a certain certainty in which we stop questioning. The certainty is important so that the mind stops interfering, stops questioning and producing frustration and all this. The study of these things is important to produce a link. If as a soul we already have this intuition, when we study in a book, it makes sense to us, and it helps to produce a link to the knowledge that we already have at the level of the soul. If we don't have the knowledge at the level of the soul, then we read this and we say nonsense, or we just don't understand it, or we are not even interested in reading this. Now, of course, the knowledge that we can get through books is very limited, but I think the main purpose is to help the mind to stop interfering, to stop producing this, this frustration and rebellion, so to say. So the idea is that as we study about this and acquire more experience, we can be in peace with how the universe works, and then we just don't think about it. We just take it naturally. So she says, we have already seen that thoughts build character. Let us next realize that actions make environment. This is part of the little diagram that we had in our previous class. So now we are going to explore how the actions produce the environment that we are going to be born in. So she says, by his actions, man affects his neighbors on the physical plane. He spreads happiness around him, or he causes distress, increasing or diminishing the sum of human welfare. This increase or diminution of happiness may be due to very different motives, good, bad, or mixed. So she brings up the idea that we may produce happiness or suffering in people and even animals around, and that this happiness or suffering may be produced with different motivation. And this is important at the level of how karma is generated and what results will come out of it. She says, a man may do an act that gives widespread enjoyment. Let us say he presents a park to a town for the free use of its inhabitants. This may be done from a longing to give happiness to his fellow creatures. Another may do a similar act, but from mere ostentation, from desire to attract attention, from those who can bestow social honors. So this would be a selfish motivation to present a park, to organize a park, for example. And then she says, a third person may give a park from mixed motives, partly unselfish, partly selfish. So we have three cases in which the action is exactly the same, but the motivation was different. So how is this going to affect the future karma? Is it that if you do something selfishly, then you don't get good results from that? Or do you get good results no matter what because you did a good action? So how does it work? This is a very frequent question when talking about karma. So she explains the motives will severally affect these three men's characters in their future incarnations for improvement, for degradation, or for small results. So we already saw that what we think, what we aspire, what we desire will determine what kind of character we have in the future. So if our motivation was altruistic, then there will be an improvement in the expression of the soul. If it was selfish, then that will produce some limitations in the psyche, as we saw. And if there was mixed motivation, then it will produce some small good results and some small bad results, if we want to talk about good and bad. However, she says, the effect of the action in causing happiness to a large number of people does not depend on the motive of the giver. People enjoy the park equally, no matter what may have prompted its gift. And this enjoyment establishes for him a karmic claim on nature, a debt due to him that will be scrupulously paid. So Annie Besant says, no matter what motive, you did produce happiness in people. So nature will repay you for that happiness that you have produced. So she explains that this person will receive a physically comfortable or luxurious environment as he has given widespread physical enjoyment, and his sacrifice of physical wealth will bring him his due reward, the karmic fruit of his action. So he donated money, he will be put in an environment where he will be affluent, so to say. Now she says this is his right, but the use he makes of his position, the happiness he derives from his wealth and his surroundings, will depend chiefly on his character. And here again, the just reward accrues to him, each seed bearing its appropriate harvest. So you see that you have in the world all kinds of people. You have some people that have everything you think a person could want, and yet this wealth may produce degradation, moral degradation. The person may be constantly unhappy and with a lot of ambition that is never satiated, or may go into excesses and drugs and unhealthy life. So even though karma brought this wealthy environment, because the character of the person is a poor character, then that wealthy environment is not going to bring happiness. It may bring pleasure here and there, or more pleasure than to other people, but along with it, it will bring more misery, and also because the character is not a strong character, when it is enabled by having money, what happens is that that person can do more wrong things than a person that has to be working all day and doesn't have even time to mess things up, so to say. So you can see that even though the environment can be very good, it depends on the character of the person what the effect is. Now, if the person was unselfish and gave this for good reasons, then he will be good. He will be born in a wealthy environment, and he will have an upright character so that he can enjoy that kind of life. And of course, he will keep using that his resources to help others also. Now, Ed asks a question that is interesting, and I'm not sure if Annie Besant mentions that here in this book. It is mentioned in some other literature, so I'll give the answer. If we come across it later, it doesn't matter. But he asks, can the motivation be neither selfish nor unselfish? The idea is that from a certain point of view, we could say there are only two kinds of motivation. Selfish in the sense of you do it because you want something, or you do it without wanting something in particular. You just do it with no motivation. That is what we would call an unselfish motivation. But yet there is a subtle difference. So, for example, what it is explained in the literature, suppose that you do this because you want to help people, because you enjoy helping people. There is like it is an unselfish action, but still you have your eyes put on the result, in the sense that if you, for example, give this park and then you want to help people and then people don't use it or people don't care about it, you could feel hurt because you couldn't produce happiness to people. That shows that although the motivation is unselfish, there is still you are still seeking the result of the action. So when there is this seeking for the result, that produces the karma that we are talking about. You have an unselfish attitude, but you are seeking for the result of it, so it will bring you to a wealthy environment, and you will be able to use it in the right way because your motivation was unselfish. Now, what happens if you do it with absolutely no personal or without seeking absolutely for any result? What happens when we do an action without having the result in mind is that because that action was not really produced from a personal center, the karma cannot return to the personal center, to the personality, because it didn't really come from the personality. So what happens is that all that karma goes back to the soul, if we want to put it in that way. Any action that is done without seeking any kind of result doesn't produce a good environment in the future. It produces a wider awakening of the soul. And this is also why you have that there is a period in evolution where, this idea in Buddhism, accumulating merits. That is good if you compare it with people who are, reckless or careless about what they do. But as long as you do something to accumulate merits, you are still working within the personality. And you will generate a happier life in the future. But you are essentially still a prisoner because you are identified with the personality. So there is a period in the spiritual life where a person may enjoy the good results of previous actions, a person that is more or less spiritual. But then there is another stage in the spiritual life where the person stops doing things seeking for a future result, and therefore stops producing positive karma in the sense of happier circumstances for the future. But then all those causes accelerate the awakening of the soul. So it's like instead of the karma being fructifying on the lower planes, it begins to fructify on the higher planes. So that is a difference that is interesting to keep in mind. So Annie Besant finishes the chapter by giving some examples as to how these causes generate effects. So you can read the whole description. I just, instead of putting all the description there, I just created a little table there where we can see, for example, that the service that is given in a lifetime produces the opening or the opportunities to give more effective help and the opportunity to be influential, in the sense that we can help. The more power we have, the more we can help if we want to use the power in that way. So whenever we help with the powers that we have at the moment, that itself will produce a widening of our powers, which hopefully will be used to do a wider kind of help. Then wasted opportunities that are not taken, are usually manifested as either misfortunes, things that happen, that you would say is bad luck, or limitations in the environment. We may want something, but the environment just doesn't allow us to do it. And Annie Besant says that this is normally the result of wasted opportunities in the past. Now, of course, karma is far more complex than A produces B, B produces C, but she's trying to give a general pattern so that we have some kind of understanding. So then she says that unkindly or neglectful acts produce the loss of people or objects. So, for example, if she says if we had somebody in our care and we didn't take care of that person, many times it happens that in a future lifetime that person becomes very important to us, and then we lose the person. Or same with objects or even circumstances. It's similar to the wasted opportunities in a sense. If we were careless about something, then the result is that in the future we will want it and not get it. Then she says the right use of faculties, and she gives the example of a musician will produce a responsive body to, for example, in this case, will produce a body with a sensitive nervous system and good coordination with the hands, for example, or whatever the artist is, or whatever the particular art is. So in general, the right use of faculties will produce a right body to express those faculties. Then she says that injuries inflicted on others, and she says, quite extreme injuries can be manifested as congenital defects or as limitations, bodily limitations. And then she says help others to understand. When people have a problem, or in whatever way we can help them to understand life, to understand themselves, is translated in receiving mental and spiritual assistance when the person needs it. So in a sense, this is part of the idea of the discipleship. When a person begins to work to help others and to help them understand, then there are openings for more opportunities for service, and then there is guidance to that person so that the person can grow. Now, keep in mind that karma is very complex. All the causes are, working out together. And also, keep in mind that what we said, that there is a lot of accumulated karma, and that the personality is just a fragment of the soul. So don't rush to conclusions with what you can see that happens in one particular lifetime, because it may be, for example, a person may be very mature spiritually and yet be working out any of these negative effects, the negative effects that we just went through. And those effects may be the result of karmic causes produced many, many lifetimes ago. You know, people who don't have a deep understanding of karma many times rush to conclusions and say, oh, this person had this loss, that's because in his previous life, you know, did this wrong. And it's not like that. As I said, most of the causes that we are working out now have been accumulated in many lifetimes, and maybe something that has really nothing to do with the level of maturity of the soul at the moment. But these are causes that have to be worked out. And same with what we see. If we see a person that has some limitations or some very bad environment, that doesn't mean that the soul has those limitations intrinsic. It can be a very spiritual soul that is just working out all these limitations at the moment. So my point here is that we can never judge what a person is at the level of the soul by what is going on with the personality. So I heard many times kind of, you know, insensitive comments or harsh comments and say, oh, this happened to this person because, you know, that person was like this. We know nothing about this. We have to be humble. We don't have the vision to understand all this working. And anyway, we should be kind always in how we judge others and ourselves, if we must judge. You know, the truth is that we shouldn't even judge. We don't have the elements. But that is the problem when we study karma in this detailed way, that some people think they can judge and figure out how things are. So take it more as a general guidance so that we have a general idea how things work. But keep always in mind the complexity of it. So this is all for today. Let's now see if there is any other comments or questions by any of you. In our next class, we are going to see how Annie Besant will talk about facing karmic results and what is a constructive way of facing the results. But is there any comment or question about this? All right. So thank you for being there. If again, if you have any comment or question after the class, you can always send me an email and we can discuss it. And then we are going to meet again next Tuesday, and I'll send a little exercise as I'm doing in case you want to practice these teachings. So thank you everybody and have a great week. Bye bye.